I genuinely couldn't believe this was a village. As an Indian, this was one of the biggest surprises of my trip to Turkey. And before anyone gets offended, India has beautiful villages too. But what shocked me was how modern, organized, and tourist friendly this place felt. If nobody had told me, I would never have guessed this was a village. So, let's explore it together. First things first, I had to get some fresh orange juice. And honestly, as someone who lives in Italy, that was already a treat. In Italy, fresh orange juice is usually more expensive, and a lot of time, people just buy the packet stuff. This wasn't as cheap as it would be in India, but at least it was freshly squeezed. Then we started heading towards the village, and that's when I got really confused. The water was this unreal shade of turquoise. The views looked straight out of a movie, and I genuinely had no idea where I was anymore. But then we arrived at the village, and I would really like to know which dictionary is using this as the definition of a village. Because in my head, a village means farms, tractors, and somebody's cow blocking the road. This looked more like a holiday destination than a village. Clearly, my definition of village needed an update. And honestly, I think Turkey has something figured out. They've taken a beautiful village and made it incredibly easy for tourists to enjoy it. Everything was clean, organized, peaceful, and because it wasn't peak season, I could actually hear my own thoughts. The whole time I was thinking, come on India, we need to learn from this. Because India has villages and mountain towns that are just as beautiful. I come from one myself. The difference is that Turkey has invested in the infrastructure, facilities, and tourism that help bring international visitors in. Meanwhile, we Indians are still keeping some of our most beautiful places a secret. And honestly, that's a bit of a shame. After walking around a bit, we decided to relax by the sea. Actually, relax is a strong word because I spent most of the time staring at the water. It was ridiculously blue. And then I noticed another thing, the cleanliness. Seriously, look at this place. I was looking for litter just to prove it wasn't perfect and I couldn't find any. That's something we all need to work on back home because no government can keep a place clean if people don't help. After all that, it was finally time for food. We stopped at this beautiful restaurant by the sea and ordered fish kebabs. The first thing I noticed was the lemon, so naturally I squeezed an unreasonable amount of it on top. Then came the chilies. Now this is where being a Nepali Indian becomes important. I confidently ate 2 of them. And honestly, I was expecting a challenge. But they weren't spicy at all. Then it was time to build a perfect sandwich. I saw all those onions inside and I was already happy. Because if there's one thing I love, it's onions. I know some people, especially in Italy, look at raw onions the way I look at horror movies. But for me, the more onions, the better. Then came more lemon, because apparently no amount of lemon is ever enough. And of course some chilies. At that point, I had successfully taken a Turkish sandwich and given it a Nepali Indian makeover. But while I was eating it, I realized something. Turkish food actually reminds me a lot of Indian food. Not exactly the same, more like Indian food's Western cousin. They're related, they share some family traits, but one of them clearly studied abroad. As we kept walking, I spotted an elderly couple strolling, and honestly, they looked like they belonged on a postcard, just casually walking, enjoying the view, looking far more romantic than anything I've ever managed. Meanwhile, my friend had his own priorities. He found a Turkish football jersey and immediately decided he needed it. Apparently, football is another thing Turkey and Italy take very seriously. So naturally, there was a photo shoot afterwards. Also, I noticed a group of women wearing hijabs sitting together and chatting. And I always find those moments interesting when I travel. It's nice to see not just the tourist attractions, but also little glimpses of everyday life and how people spend their time. Then we did something absolutely crazy. We hitchhiked. And before my dad sees this video, no, this was not my idea. Honestly, I had never hitchhiked before, not even in my own town. Not because it's impossible, just because I'm too awkward to ask strangers for help. My brain immediately goes, no, I'll pay the fare, thank you very much. But somehow in Turkey, I ended up standing on the side of the road asking for a lift. And the funniest part, the truck that picked us up was carrying cat food. So my first hitchhiking experience wasn't in India, it wasn't in Italy, it was in Turkey in a cat food truck. Exactly how I imagined my life would turn out. But honestly, it felt good. Sometimes traveling makes you do things you'd never do at home. After our very glamorous hitchhiking adventure in a cat food truck, we arrived in another town, and somehow it was just as beautiful as the first one. The water was still that unreal shade of blue that looked photoshopped. The main difference was this place felt more lived in. I could see more houses. Although honestly, with a place this pretty, I couldn't always tell if they were homes, hotels, or someone's dream retirement plan. The whole town had this relaxed coastal atmosphere. And walking around here, I started to understand why so many people associate this part of Turkey with the Mediterranean lifestyle. The architecture, the waterfront, the cafes, the pace of life, it felt very different from the image of Turkey that I had in my head before visiting. The more I traveled, the more I realized how difficult it is to fit a country like Turkey into a single stereotype. One thing I noticed everywhere in Turkey was statues and portraits of Atatürk. And as someone who doesn't know much about Turkish politics, I quickly realized one thing. This man is kind of a big deal. From what I understood, he played a huge role in the founding of modern Turkey, which is probably why you see him everywhere. And honestly, the amount of respect people have for him is hard to miss. Meanwhile, me, a confused Indian tourist who has just learned the basics, I decided to bow to the statue, just to be safe. At this point, Turkey should probably give me honorary citizenship, or at least a discount on my next tea. Honestly, the best thing about this trip was that we had a Turkish local with us, because without her, we would have been completely lost. Not metaphorically, literally. She was also the one explaining things to me, including who Atatürk was. Because before this trip, I didn't even know his name. So if I sound intelligent in this vlog, please know that none of it is my own work. And that's why I always think having a local with you makes a huge difference. You get to see the place through their eyes, not just through Google Maps. Also, I have realized something about myself. I'm not a solo traveler. People always talk about finding themselves on solo trips. I don't want to find myself. I want someone to take my pictures and tell me where we're going. For me, every trip is more fun with friends. Of course, even with friends, I spend a lot of time staring at the view and overthinking. Looking at these houses, I kept wondering, who lives there? And do they realize how lucky they are to wake up to this every day? Then I spotted this fancy boat. And my next thought was, who is rich enough for that? Because it's definitely not me. So that was my day in a Turkish village. A little bit of sightseeing, a little bit of overthinking, and a lot of beautiful views. See you in my next